Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive into first wave of Bears free agency. We're going to be talking about Blackhawks and baseball and all types of goodness. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is going on right now, but it is not going on for long. So make sure you head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, it has been a wild sports ride since last time we talked.
I know it has. And I was going to ask you how your bracket's doing, but I think everybody's answer is the same.
Oh my goodness. It's been wild. You know, once everybody's bracket's been busted, like when your bracket gets busted, it's not fun. But once everybody's bracket's busted, then it's fun again because you're like, all right, it doesn't matter anymore because we're all on equal terrible footing.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, look, I'm in two brackets, one with buddies, one with work, and they're both $20 buy-ins. So it's like, okay, you know, probably gonna be out $40, whatever, no big deal. And when everything gets broken, that's when I could just be like, you know what? Let's see the chaos. Give me the chaos, give me the madness, because that's really what we love watching.
Yes, absolutely. I'm in one pool where out of like 140 people, I'm 100th. But I also, the possible points, I have the most possible points I could get. So I could still win this, even though I'm in 100th place.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that we had early on, we had expectations that was, we knew that there was obviously going to be some upsets. There always is. But I mean, when you see Purdue losing to FDU, a 16 seed beating a 1 seed, I mean, that is a historic feat. That has happened so few times. And
this is the second time.
Yeah, only the second. Like, that's crazy. Like, this is only the second time. And listen, it just goes to show that you really do have to go out and play the game. There's no surefire thing in this tournament because it's a humble reminder that players are indeed human. And, the way people respond when the lights are shining brightest is differently. I mean, this tournament means so much to so many people. I mean, you have how many possible brackets that were being tracked, 20 plus million brackets. And I think by now it's like less than 3% of people's are actually intact. So for anyone that had FDU, good for you.
It's alumni and students of FDU.
Yeah. Or just somebody that was just flipping a coin or something, they weren't even looking at it because, I tried to pick a few upsets, but I didn't go with anything like Albatross. I mean, you look at some of the other losses too, the defending champion Kansas State or Kansas, they fell, and then Missouri fell, and then those are kind of big deals too. Obviously, nothing will compare to Purdue losing to FDU, but you have a decent number of upsets here already, and it makes you wonder if this happened in this round. The next round is going to be interesting too, because what we want at this point, since our brackets are busted, we want more chaos. Bring me the chaos.
Yes, I want to see double-digit seeds all throughout the Elite Eight.
Wouldn't that be crazy? And I think so. I might have talked about this on our show last week. I brought up at work my boss and I and some of my other coworkers were doing a giant sports pool. So we answer a series of questions and they cover everything. They cover college and MLB, NHL, NFL, NBA, golf, tennis, like the Grand Slams, NASCAR racing. It covers everything. And one of the questions was, what was the lowest seed that was going to make, I want to say it was the Elite Eight. I don't think it was a Sweet 16. I think it was the Elite Eight. And I said something like 9. And it's like, well, it could still be the case. Like that could, but there's bound to be a few more upsets, I feel like.
Oh, I think there will be. And the thing is like, even if you're a low seed, so many of these games are about matchup styles.
Right.
That, like Princeton winning, that's not due to talented players. It's due to a system, and you don't get to practice against these. You know, because you don't know who you're playing, and you're playing so frequently, you just don't get to really practice against this style that you've never seen all season long. And suddenly, boom, they get you playing their style of game, and if you don't hustle up and get done, these games are so short that you don't have a chance to come out of it.
And how many times do we see teams that are supposed to win? Like you saw it with Purdue. It's like they were panicking. They were playing scared almost in that second half.
Yeah, and the other team's coach knew it.
There's
a video of him he knew it. And that's, that happens. Like I didn't predict Purdue to go very far, but
to be eliminated by a 16 seed.
Yeah. I'm never going to pick a 16 over a 1 in my pool, because that's just a recipe for having a bad bracket. But, sometimes lightning strikes.
Yes, it does. And one thing I wanted to say is, as an Illinois fan, I think I speak for most Illinois fans by saying we're not really surprised by the outcome. It was a very unpleasant game to watch. I mean, just all year, Illinois was inconsistent. And when things went bad, it went bad. And it was an ugly game all around, bad turnovers. You were desperately trying to make the 3-ball work when you're not good at doing that. I mean, there were times I was like, am I watching the Bulls? Like they're jacking up threes when they know they can't shoot threes well. Like even not just this Bulls, but like watching remember the Fred Hoiberg days when they had a Fred Hoiberg system and they gave him players that weren't really meant for his system. So they were trying to make them do things that they weren't meant for. I mean, that's what it kind of felt like watching Illinois. And the funny thing is that they were down by 10 at halftime. And I said, this is a miracle that we're within 10. It could easily be like an 18-point deficit. So it went to show how well that game went.
It was, they drew a real tough matchup. That was not the matchup for them. And
no, it wasn't.
They're a flawed team, but they're not a bad team. They're a flawed team. And they ran into a really tough matchup in round 1.
And all their problems were exposed because of that.
Pretty much, yes. And, going into that, I was like, man, there's no way I'm picking Illinois to win this game, because this is a tough matchup. They really got a short end of the stick on that matchup.
And, this feels different than the last 2 years, because the last 2 years, you felt like Illinois had a legit chance to make a run. And then they lost in the second round. I mean, those were brutal losses. I will never forget how pissed I was when they lost to Loyola a few years ago. I was so angry and so disappointed. Where this year, like you said, the matchup wasn't ideal, and I didn't think that they just had the team to make a run this year. There was flaws. There were noticeable flaws, and even if they did draw a better matchup in the first round, I don't think they would have gone much further than that. So it just wasn't that big of a surprise. compared to the other last few years, especially when you had Io DeSumo. That's when I think I felt as good about Illinois basketball since I was a kid, and they had that year where they made it far, 2005. And, that was the best I had felt about Illinois basketball, where this year I'm like, well, they can win games, but then they'll also lay some eggs. And like I said, when things got ugly for Illinois this year, they got ugly.
Yep, absolutely. So let's dive into the Bears here.
A lot to dive into.
A lot to dive into. So we are now almost a week into free agency, and the Bears have spent a ton of money and signed a bunch of players, and we can start to see how the roster is starting to shape up. So let's go through each of the signings and kind of give our impressions and go from there. So the Bears brought in TJ Edwards, linebacker from the Philadelphia Eagles. He played college with Jack Sanborn at Wisconsin. He is a local kid. Grew up a Bears. Yep. Grew up a Bears fan. There's stories about how he would go tailgating in a Devin Hester jersey, and Lance Briggs is his favorite player, and he waited like 2 hours in a line to meet Brian Urlacher. So you've got a kid that grew up a Bears fan playing for the Bears.
And he's coming off a really nice year too, a career high in tackles. And if you're into the AV stuff, if you go to Pro Football Reference, if you're into AV, the value, career high in that as well. So.
Yeah, and he was brought in for a very, very reasonable contract. None of the Bears signings were like bank breaking at all. I mean, Tremaine Edmonds got a big chunk, but most of these were value signings, and TJ Edwards is no exception.
I thought it was kind of a steal, honestly. Like when you evaluate the market and the value of that position, that felt like a really good deal for the Bears.
Absolutely. And the Bears had, we've seen historically in this style of defense, the players that you want to bring in. We saw it in Tampa. And then we saw it with our own Chicago Bears. So you had that linebacking core of Briggs, Urlacher, and Hunter Hillenmeyer. And you had Brian Urlacher was the leader of that defense. He was the coverage guy. And then Lance Briggs was the tackling machine. And you had Hunter Hillenmeyer on the strong side. And the Bears could not do what they wanted to do with the linebacking core they had last year. It started with, Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith is a very good linebacker. It's just a difference in styles. People, when they compared Urlacher with Ray Lewis and who's better, they're different. There's different guys. And, Brian Urlacher would not have been nearly as good as Ray Lewis in the Baltimore style of defense, but Ray Lewis would not have been nearly as good as Brian Urlacher in the style of defense the Bears were playing. It's just a style. And, as much as they liked Roquan Smith, he just didn't fit perfectly in what they were trying to do. And my watch is yelling at me. So, when he left, I don't think they took it as a extraordinarily huge loss. And signing TJ Edwards felt like it was a bigger fit. and he's going to fit into that Lance Briggs spot.
Well, and remember this too, is that when we had Roquan Smith in all those years under Matt Nagy, that was a 3-4 defense. We're going back to 4-3. So to your point about the different scheme and different fit, I mean, that right there is kind of like the thing that sticks out to you, like the difference between the two.
Right. And then they're playing the Tampa 2 style. It's just differences. And TJ Edwards is going to fill that Lance Briggs spot. And I was like, okay, this is a nice signing. I like this one. It is a low cost. It's a guy is going to give his full effort because he's playing for the team he loves as a fan, and he's a young guy. He's 26 years old.
Yeah, and I like the idea of fixing your linebacking core with experienced guys. I think that is a solid approach to this, and not only experienced guys. TJ Edwards played on the Eagles. That's the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. That was a defense that was really, really good. So he's coming from not only another NFL team, but a very successful one. So I think that has some value too.
And the Bears also made their big splash with signing linebacker Tremaine Edmonds from Buffalo Bills. And he's a guy that I mentioned to keep an eye on because he's somebody I'd identified as I thought would be great on the Bears. But I didn't know if they would make that splash signing with him. What's crazy is he's played 5 seasons in the league and he's 24 years old.
He's younger than Velus Jones.
He's going to finish out this 4-year contract and still be in his prime. So he'll have finished out 9 years in the league and still be in his prime.
Yeah,
That's
I know,
crazy.
Because it is crazy. He made his debut in 2018. I mean, that was the year the Bears last won the division in the first year of Matt Nagy. The Bears played the Bills that year. And that was when the Bills were like historically bad in terms of scoring. And the Bears obviously beat them. But, that was Edmonds' first year. And like you said, he's still only 24 years old. He's going to be 25 soon, but still, I mean, that really is something. And this was a pleasant surprise to me because I really wasn't expecting this. But I think one of the important things to look here is when you look at Tremaine Edmonds and you have him in there as well as TJ Edwards, you take those two and you're like, okay, do you want to pay $20 million to Roquan Smith or pay a little more than that to get 2 quality players?
And a second round pick.
And a second round pick. So, and again, we don't want to say this to trash Roquan. This just fits better. This is a new regime. This is a new vision. This is a new system.
Right. So it's that comment you made, it's to the fans that are saying, well, if you spent this much money on Tremaine Edmonds, why didn't you just pay Roquan Smith? That's the reason, is you ended up getting a second round pick and 2 linebackers that fit your system better for Roquan Smith, essentially. So that money that you allocated for him, trading him away, got you 2 linebackers and a second round pick. So that's the reason you do it. It's you fit the scheme. And the thing is we've spent so long with Ryan Pace as our GM, who's always spinning and deceiving and never giving you a straight answer. And now we have Ryan Poles, who keeps telling us exactly what he's doing, and we try to interpret it and guess. He really just tells us.
He is so transparent. I mean, you never heard from Ryan Pace. It's like, did he exist? Is he still awake? A lot more transparency from Ryan Poles.
Yeah, so he just tells you. And, after in the press conference, after the signings, he just talked about players and fits and what you're trying to do and traits that you want to have. And, so they're just bringing in the guys that fit what they're trying to do.
And it helps you understand their vision better. which I think does services to the fans.
And people, I've seen some fans being, well, why are we trying to solve the linebackers when we have no defensive line? Well, part of that is Ryan Poles told you that they can't fix everything in one off season. And part of that is, like, here's the reasons. One, the market of free agents is not that robust. Two, it's not financially responsible for a salary cap to just go out and sign a ton of free agents. Three, you still haven't finished wave 2 and 3 of the free agency or the draft. Like, you still have a lot of room to add players, but they found guys for the budget that they had assigned, and they found those linebackers. You needed to improve the linebacking play that from last year. Sure, the defensive line needs to be vastly improved, but you've got to go step by step. Would it
right?
be
You're not addressing an issue that's irrelevant, because defensive line is a very, very relevant issue. But you know what? Linebacking is a very, very relevant issue too.
Yeah. So, would they have liked to have fixed the offensive defensive lines first? I'm sure they would have. Then that's literally what they tried to do. I mean, they tried to sign a 3 technique last year as the first signing they didn't work out, and they went hard for a right tackle in free agency, and he went way over what they were comfortable spending and walked away. And then people are like, well, then why didn't they go after Orlando Brown? Because that was a reasonable contract. Ryan Poles told you he was not a fit for what they were trying to do. And, Greg Gabriel said it a little more bluntly. It's that he's not athletic. And in the system that the Bears are trying to run, you need athletic offensive linemen. And he said, Larry Borum is not a good enough athlete to be a lineman in this system. And Orlando Brown isn't the athlete that Larry Borum is. Now, does that mean Orlando Brown is not a good offensive lineman? No. It's just, are you trying to have big fat guys that, stand there, or are you trying to have a more athletic line to do different things? It's just a different scheme, and the Bears are looking for more athletic linemen. Orlando Brown didn't fit that.
And here's the thing, and maybe this sounds a little contradictory to other things. We obviously know that the offensive line is going to be addressed in the draft and other ways. You have made a few signings, which we'll get to, but you see, and I know it sounds cliche, and I know it sounds like, oh, you're just coping, blah, 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 but there are truly times when you look and say, you know what, we really shouldn't overpay for that guy.
Right. Because, the thing is the guys that you spend big on in the first day of free agency are the guys that you regret signing for those contracts later on.
Yeah. And I mean, think about it too, is how often in the Ryan Pace era did we jump on free agents and just give them so much money?
Yep. And that's why we were in the predicament we were in when Ryan Poles was hired. And that's
right.
why we had to tank, because, first things first is you had to shed all of those contracts and then stink it up in order to get to, a place where things are good.
Giving Jimmy Graham all that money, giving Andy Dalton all that money. I like Robert Quinn, but he was paid a lot, and he was already older by the time we signed him.
Right.
Again, he played well, but it was a lot of money.
Then the Bears, they signed. I'm not doing this in an order. Sorry, I just wrote them down by memory. So the order I'm giving them in were the order I remembered them in when I wrote them down.
Well, you got the first two right. Edwards was the first big one. There was one between Edmonds, but like those were the two big ones on the first day.
The Bears did sign Travis Homer, and
Oh,
I saw some people suggest that he was going to be the replacement for David Montgomery.
no.
And I hate to break it to you, and it's going to suck because I like the other guy, but he's going to be the replacement for DeAndre Houston Carson, who I don't think the Bears are going to bring back.
Yeah, I mean, you bring in Homer because he's a good blocker and he's going to be used in certain situations. He's not going to be your number one guy. This is good that you're getting depth and solid depth at that. And you look at his resume and what he does well, and you could say, okay, that stuff's important.
Yeah. I mean, he told you, he's like, I want to block and play special teams. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to be in there. He's going to probably be the personal protector for the punter. He's going to be playing special teams. And if he's in there on offensive plays, it's going to be in a pass play where he's going to be, extra help protecting Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly who he is. That's who he is.
That's what he was always meant to be.
Mm-hmm. So he's going to be replacing DeAndre Houston Carson as that special teams ace. We brought in Nate Davis on a pretty decent contract, 3-year, $30 million. And he's a right guard. And I looked back, I don't see any record of him playing left guard at all. So he's going to be playing that spot that Tevin Jenkins has been occupying. I'm fairly certain here. So he'll be playing that right guard spot. And he's a young ascending player, another guy, 26 years old, coming from a successful program with a successful offensive line in Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, it's a signing that makes sense. It's another sign that makes sense. And, with Tevin Jenkins is you move Tevin Jenkins and you also have insurance because either or, if Tevin Jenkins were to stay at that position and then he went down, we saw what happened last year with that.
Right. We brought in DeMarcus Walker, defensive lineman, on a pretty nice deal, 3-year, $21 million. He's also in his prime, 28 years old. He has been an edge rusher and played 3 technique as well. So he's a guy that's going to be, he's not going to be a centerpiece on a defensive line, but he is going to be a good rotational piece.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a guy that you could play 3 technique, or you can put him out on the edge. He's going to be a rotation piece and not your centerpiece.
Which is also good that you're making these moves because you need this. How bad has the Bears' depth been for how long?
Yeah, and he's going to make your line better than it was last year, but it's a step. It's not where you want it to be yet, but you're getting step there. So if you don't improve at all, he's making the baseline higher than it was last year. And if you add, but he's not precluding you from making more moves. So if he's your edge guy, and then hypothetically say you got like Will Anderson, that's not stopping you from getting Will Anderson. It's like, okay, now we've got a rotation of Dominique Robinson, Trevis Gibson, Will Anderson, and DeMarcus Walker. Like those are our edge. And you start seeing, we've got waves of pass rushers like the Eagles did.
And how well did that turn out for them?
I turned out pretty well.
Historically good in sacks.
So I like that signing. It is not, and plus a lot of these contracts, the way that they're structured, it's a lot of the money is being paid up front in this year and next year, where you've got excess money, and they're they're lighter on the back end when you're going to be paying Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
So
remember when Ryan Pace, I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but remember when his strategy was kick the can down the road?
yeah, we're trying not to do that. That's bad. And there's going to be a point when you're paying a quarterback an astronomical amount of money that you do have to kick the can down the road sometimes. But
that's not the case here.
That's not what you want to do, and that shouldn't be what we're doing right now.
No.
And then we had the Bears bring in PJ Walker, who was quarterback with the Rough Riders, and played for the Panthers. And clearly you saw the Bears must have been scouting Carolina a lot, because they brought in a few Carolina players, either via trade or free agency. But PJ Walker has some experience in the league. He's also played in other leagues, and he's still young. He's 28 years old, and he's a much better fit for the system that we're doing than Trevor Siemian. And I saw some people say like, oh, Walker is going to be the backup or the third string guy. And I was like, I don't think so. I'm imagining that Trevor Siemian's going to get his walking papers pretty soon. And lo and behold, he did.
Yep.
So PJ Walker is going to be the primary backup. And it's a much better fit. Is you kind of, Baltimore has been successful at this, is finding backups that have a similar skill set to Lamar Jackson, because you don't have to alter your play calling or your scheme when your backup quarterback has to come in. And that's more of what they're trying to do with Justin Fields. Trevor Siemian, I'm not knocking him. It just, he was a much different quarterback than Justin Fields. So bringing in a guy that's, one, better fit, two, cheaper, and three, has worked with your new number one wide receiver last year. So he has that rapport. So if he has to come in, he at least has a rapport with one wide receiver.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I say the same thing every year we bring in a backup. The main number one goal is to not have to rely on him.
Right. The Bears brought in Deontay Foreman. He's going to be the replacement for David Montgomery, who left in free agency, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Deontay Foreman, I like him. I liked him coming out of college. He had last year, especially if you look at the latter 2/3 of the season, he was phenomenal last year. And you brought him back for, very little money as far as NFL goes. He's a $3 million 1-year contract.
Yeah, it's a nice deal.
He, you watch him run, and he runs like Derrick Henry, where he will just bowl some people over. I watched one play. It was a goal line play, and he got stood up, and he took a step back, just dropped his shoulder, and then bowled over the defensive end. He didn't bowl over the, a cornerback or a safety. He bowled over the defensive end and drove him into the end zone after he had been stopped. You're like, man, this guy's got some power. And he's also, I don't know what he runs now, but coming out of college, he was a 4.45 guy. So, he's got speed to break those plays open. So he's a guy I think the Bears fans are going to like once they see him start running the ball.
Yeah, no, I like him a lot too. I thought this was a very good move. Now my question is, though, do you still draft somebody?
That depends. If you're the Bears organization, I can't answer this because we didn't see enough of him, but how do you feel about Treston Ebner? If you feel that Treston Ebner showed you a lot during practices and things like that, or, you saw him working out in the off season to make himself better, or how he understood the playbook, if you feel comfortable with him, I don't think you need to. Personally, I'm going to anyway because Foreman's on a 1-year contract.
Yep.
I didn't
Mhm.
see enough of Ebner to be high on him, but it also, what it does is it makes the priority of drafting a running back not so high. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. You don't have to reach for one.
right. Like if you grab one in the 5th, 6th round and they don't pan out, don't worry. It's a later round pick. And don't be surprised if they don't pick up a couple of guys as undrafted rookies to
Sure.
bring into camp, because we're seeing more and more that later round and undrafted rookie running backs are performing well. And so if I'm the Bears, I'm probably going to take a later round pick. But if you don't bring in Foreman and you're going with Ebner and Herbert, the before that signing, I was legitimately going, man, I wonder, based on some of the comments that Ryan Poles made, would they be willing to move up in the 2nd round or drop back from 9 all the way to the later part of the 1st round and try to take like a Bijan Robinson, who's the top running back in this draft? And I was like, those started going through my head. And I was like, well, you signed Deontay Foreman. I think that says you don't need to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Deontay Foreman is a really important pickup for this year. But like you said, this right now, it's going to be a 1-year solution. So I would think that even if you don't have to reach, I still think drafting a running back is pretty important. And I mean, I've been thinking about this too, is I would like to see the Bears get just a speed demon at running back. We got guys that can physically handle it. And I know Foreman's got decent speed, but I would just love like a speed demon as a running back.
Yeah.
Put that in the mix.
Yeah. You want somebody that's got Herbert.
Because you don't want it to be
Foreman.
Justin Fields.
Yeah. Herbert and Foreman are similar style guys. You'd like to see somebody that's a change of pace kind of guy. But
Right.
I'm with you. I'm fine drafting somebody later on, bringing some guys in from the undrafted class to keep churning so you have a stable of running backs you're happy with, because there's nothing stopping them from bringing Foreman back next year if he's doing well, sign into an extension.
Sure, of course.
But I mean, here's the fact is, David Montgomery got a 3-year, $18 million deal. And that right now, Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert are making a combined like 3.9 million.
Yeah, and I think it's good for either side, the Lions and the Bears. And listen, initially I was a little bummed because it's like, oh man, he's in division, really. But look, I've talked about Dave Montgomery a lot on this show before. I like Dave Montgomery. He's a good player. He's very easy to root for, but he's not irreplaceable. And giving a 3-year extension to a guy who's good but not elite, I can live without that. I'm not saying that it was bad for the Lions, because I think he could do really well in Detroit with that offensive line. I think him in Detroit will work out very, very well. But I'm cool with the Bears not ponying up that money. Am I bummed that he's, in division and you got to root against him now, especially since he's on a division rival? I am. I was a little sad when I first heard that, but, you kind of come back to reality and say, I get it. I mean, frankly, I thought Montgomery was probably gone either way. Because look, it's not as common to pay running backs like that anymore.
Right. I'm curious. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to this, but I'm curious of what, because I do believe Ryan Poles when he said that he liked David Montgomery and he hoped that they could find a number to make him happy and come back with the Bears. I believe him that they would have liked to had him back. I just wonder what that number was that the Bears, put as their cap.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. If they could have gotten him maybe on a 2-year deal or a 3-year with a little less, then maybe he is back. But, I think that it makes sense for Ryan Poles to kind of draw a line somewhere because, you're doing it for multiple reasons because you can say, you know what? We like him as a running back. He is a good player. And if we get him at the right value, it makes sense to bring him back. But if not, we're not going to overextend ourselves because we can work out other ways.
And here's something that's kind of cool is the Bears now have 2 of the handful of running backs with 3+ yards per attempt after contact for the 2021 and 2022 seasons. So as soon as somebody made contact, you averaged 3+ yards per attempt after contact. And the Bears now have 2 of those running backs in Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert.
Yeah.
And for a total of $3.9 million per year.
Yeah, you're getting great value.
Right. So I'm happy with that signing. And if the Bears don't make any other moves, I'm still not a big believer in Treston Ebner. But again, I don't have a lot of anything to base that on. But
I'd be a little upset if they did not go out and draft somebody. I feel like, Treston Ebner might be a decent depth guy if he gets more of a chance, but I don't think that should hold them back from drafting somebody else.
Oh, no. But I'm saying if they end up not, or if that's, they bring in somebody, it doesn't make the squad or ends up practice squad, and that's your 3 is Foreman, Herbert, and Ebner with Blossom Game as your fullback. I'm okay with that. I could live with that. But I would like to see some competition for the lower roster spots.
Yeah, because it would actually mean you have some depth.
Yeah. Then the Bears brought in Andrew Billings, a defensive tackle from the Raiders on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And it's funny, I feel like I called this one because there really were no 3 techniques left to sign in free agency that were worth the money. And I was like, okay, well, if you're not going to sign a 3 technique, we still have Justin Jones, we signed last year as our 3 technique, and he didn't play terribly. We just need to improve. It was like, why not, if we can't improve at the 3 technique in free agency, why not improve at the 1 tech? And they went out and did that by bringing in Andrew Billings. And I was reading some Raiders beat writers who all spoke glowingly of him just having a phenomenal year, and Pro Football Focus ratings show that he had a phenomenal year, especially against the run. So this, I think, fit-wise and talent-wise, does improve our defensive line.
I agree.
So honestly, again, like the Walker signing,
It doesn't fix your issues, but it helps it.
Yeah, it makes it. It's on the track to having a much improved defensive line. So that's where the Bears are in free agency right now. And it's weird. People are like, the Bears didn't do enough. They spent a ton of money and they brought in a lot of guys.
There's one more.
Oh, sorry. Robert Tonyan, the tight end from the Green Bay Packers.
I really like this one.
So I really wanted so there's the 2 types of tight ends. There's, the Y tight end, which is Cole Kmet, where you're an inline blocker and you can go out and receive passes. And then there's the move or the U tight end that's going to be more of a receiving threat. And Robert Tonyan is that type of guy. I really wanted them to try to bring in Mike Gesicki. I thought that his underuse in Miami last year was going to drive down his market, and it did. I think he's getting $9 million, but I think that might have been a little number high for the Bears, figuring that Cole Kmet is going to be doing extension. But they bring in Robert Tonyan, who is another grew up as a Bears fan.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming he's healthy, here's the reasons why he's helpful. He knows the system because he played in it.
Luke Getsy.
He's going to walk in, he's going to know the playbook for the most part, all the formations, the verbiage. He's going to know it. And he's going to be a complementary piece to what Cole Kmet is. We haven't had a move tight end. We had one where we signed one that we thought that's what it was going to be, but Jimmy Graham was 400 years old and didn't provide what he was signed to do. This is a better signing.
You now have multiple tight ends that can be targets for Justin Fields. I really like that.
Yeah. So it's a short-term move because don't be surprised if the Bears draft a tight end, because this tight end class is pretty deep, and the Tonyan deal is 1 year. And obviously, if the Tonyan works out, because he had a knee injury that was pretty devastating. I think last year was his first year back. So
he only played 5 games in 2021.
Yeah. So,
and before he got hurt, he was coming off a year where he had 11 touchdown catches and over 500 yards.
Right. And so I think if he shows that he's worth, the deal, the Bears are not going to be uncomfortable re-signing him, but it's a low risk, high reward type move. But it doesn't stop you from drafting somebody in this class. Just makes it where you don't have to draft somebody high.
Yeah, I really thought that this was a really smart move to make, because you have a guy who's had a successful past. And if you get what you got out of him, something like 2020, when he was really, really good, if you get decent production, something similar to that, I'm not expecting as good, because, obviously you were playing on the 2020 Packers. They made it to the NFC Championship. You were playing with Aaron Rodgers in an MVP season. But, if he can play decently productive as a passing tight end, then that just makes your weapon set even better. Because, look, Cole Kmet was your number 1 receiver last year. Your tight end was your number 1 receiver in 2022. And he was the only tight end that you can rely throwing to. He was one of the few targets you can rely throwing to, period. Not only have you brought in more wide receivers, you brought in another tight end that could be a reliable target. So you're just helping Justin Fields more and more with this stuff. And you know what? If he doesn't fully recover from that injury and doesn't produce like he once did, like you said, it's a 1-year deal.
I mean, if he gives you what he gave you last year, or gave the Packers last year, I think you're pretty happy.
Sure. He had over 400 yards last year. So you didn't have the touchdown numbers, but you're only targeted when you're targeted in the end zone. So yeah, 470 yards last year, coming off, an injury. You played in 17 games. You only started 3, but you played in 17 games. So at least after that injury, he was, playing, even if he wasn't starting. So those are all good signs.
And the crazy part about this is the Bears, before signing all these players and before making the big trade for the number 1 pick, the Bears had the most cap space in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
They made a trade where they acquired a $20 million player. And then they threw out a $72 million contract, a $30 million contract, $21 million contract, and several other contracts. And the Bears still have $41.5 million left to spend, and they still have the most cap space of anybody in the league by about $15 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's where things are going to, this flexibility is nice because at some point, teams are going to start releasing players as cap casualties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes these players aren't good. They're released because they're not good anymore and you cut ties. But sometimes you cut ties with a player because you can't afford him, period. And he's still very good. You can't fit it in your budget. And you make those tough decisions. And then sometimes it's a player, still a good player. He's just owed too much money to be worthwhile. But if he gets cut and you can sign him to a lesser money and he's still a value player. So having that kind of money allows you to maneuver through the cap casualties situation and pluck whichever ones you want.
Right. You have
So-
the flexibility to do so much more still.
Absolutely. And that's why this is it also gives you, I like this. What they're doing is they're like, okay, where can we plug in guys in our greatest areas of need? And it makes it so whenever you draft, you just draft the best guy you can because, there's not a gaping hole. If you have a gaping hole, you're kind of cornered into a spot and you're like, okay, well, we have to draft a quarterback or we have to draft a running back or we have to draft a cornerback or whatever the case may be. You're like, we have nothing. We have bare bones there. Everybody kind of knows what you're doing. If you're the Bears and you start filling these holes, you're like, okay, listen, we have freedom to be able to, what happens if, let's say one of the quarterbacks falls and a team that was later in the draft, pick 17, 18, 19, 20, goes, oh man, one of the quarterbacks fell. We couldn't move up into the top 3 to get a quarterback, but we could make a move to get to 9. Like the Giants and the Bears when they traded with the Giants, they moved up. What if that happens and a team goes, all right, we're giving you next year's first and a pick swap this year. And the Bears now have, okay, well, we're not in the top 10 anymore. Ryan Poles said it was important for them to stay in the top 10. And I think that's twofold. One, because he talked about needing blue chip players. Staying in the top 10 gives you a better chance to get a blue chip player. And they said with the quarterbacks, so not excluding the quarterbacks, they identified 6 or 7 blue chip players in this draft. And I think I'm imagining that only 1 or 2 of the quarterbacks got that grade in their system. I don't think Levis and Richardson are getting that blue chip player because they
seem like too big of projects.
And Young, I don't know if he was even it because of his size. They might not have labeled him a blue chip guy, but maybe. But max 2 guys are blue chip are quarterbacks. So you've identified like 4 or 5 non-quarterbacks that are blue chip players. So you give yourself the better shot of being able to get one of the blue chip players, or you give yourself that flexibility to still be able to trade back and get substantial value. Can you imagine if the Bears are able to have 3 first-round picks next year?
That would be amazing. That would be a dream come true.
So,
and if they have 3 first-round picks next year after having a much better season this year.
Yeah. So that is kind of why I thought he was saying it's important to stay in that top 10, because it gives you the opportunity to either trade back or have a good shot to get a blue chip player.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So looking at the players they have under contract now, you can start to piece together what an offensive or what a starting roster is looking like. So on defense, you've Kyler Gordon is probably your slot corner. And Jalen Johnson, one of the outside guys, and I'm guessing Jalen Jones, the other outside guy. I thought he played the best out of the other cornerbacks from last year. But I think those are your 3 starting cornerbacks. Obviously, you're set at safety with Brisker and Jackson. I think you're set at linebacker with Edwards, Edmonds, and Sanborn playing that Sam spot, being the Hunter Hill and Meyer. And then your defensive line is Travis Gibson, Andrew Billings, Justin Jones, and DeMarcus Walker. So you're like, okay, is that awesome? No. Is it better than what we had last year? Yes.
Yeah, no doubt.
Significantly better at the linebacker position. A good upgrade over where you were at cornerback, because Gordon struggled early and found himself at the end. So you're going to have a more experienced second-year cornerback. Jalen Jones rose from the bottom to the top and went from an undrafted player to a starting player. So I think you're going to see better there, and hopefully a healthy Jalen Johnson. And the defensive line are they light years better? No. But are they better? Yes. And again, I speak glowingly about the moves they make. Nobody is Nostradamus. Nobody has the crystal ball. You sign players based on the evidence you have and your projections. And I think the ones that they've made so far are good.
Yeah, I agree.
On offense, I think it's pretty obvious your 3 starting wide receivers are Mooney, DJ Moore, and Claypool. And then you've got Komet as your Y and Robert Tanyan as your move tight ends. Fields and Herbert, or Fields and Foreman as your backfield. But then you're like, okay, what does that offensive line look like?
Work in progress, no doubt.
And I sat down and I'm like, okay, what do I picture? So Ryan Poles said they're going to try to get their 5 best offensive linemen out there at the same time. I'm like, okay, what does that look like right now? And so I came up with 4 combinations of where we're at. And it made me feel, did I feel good? No. But did I feel better than when we whiffed on McGlinchey and we haven't signed any offensive linemen or any tackles? Yes. So I'm going to go through my 4 combinations, and I'm not in love with any of them, but I at least feel a little bit better. So in all 4 scenarios, I have Braxton Jones on the left side, the left tackle. And all 4 scenarios, I have Nate Davis playing right guard. And these are scenarios based on players that are actually under contract with the Bears, not guys that are still available in free agency or potential draft picks.
You're not playing hypotheticals here.
Yeah, this is literally people they have under contract. So the first scenario I have is the one that I think they hinted at, or was based on a hint that Poles gave. So I have Braxton Jones at left tackle, Travis Tevin Jenkins at left guard, Cody Whitehair at center, Nate Davis at right guard, and Alex Leatherwood at right tackle. The next combination, I have Braxton Jones at left tackle, Alex Leatherwood at left guard, Cody Whitehair at center, Nate Davis at right guard, Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. Third one I have is Jones on the left, Whitehair at left guard, Doug Kramer at center, Nate Davis on the right guard, and Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. And the last one, I have Braxton Jones, left tackle, Cody Whitehair at left guard, Lucas Patrick at center, Nate Davis at right guard, and Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. So I don't love any of those, and obviously if Doug Kramer comes back from injury and looks good, I think that gives you the best best situation, because then you're like, okay, number one, he's under contract for this season plus 2 more seasons at less than $1 million a year, and he's an ascending player, and it gives you the freedom to move Whitehair back to left guard, or to even be a backup if you still see Tevin Jenkins as your future guard.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could cut him and save yourself a ton of cap space. So it gives you all of those flexibilities. Same thing with Lucas Patrick. If Lucas Patrick looks good, and it gives you that flexibility to do something with Cody Whitehair. But it's how healthy is Tevin Jenkins?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest worries.
And how well did Alex Leatherwood perform, in your opinions, as the coaching staff? Because we didn't see enough of him on the playing field to kind of grade that out.
It was a small sample size.
And how do we see him practicing? How are we seeing him work out in the off season, and etc.? Because the knock on him was he was drafted in the first round when everyone projected him to be a second rounder.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a fantastic offensive lineman for Alabama. So it's not like he was some chump out of nowhere. If Alex Leatherwood, there's a reason that we traded for him rather than waiting for him to be cut, and are paying that money, is that if we can convert him into a usable piece, whether that be a guard or tackle, that's a huge win for the Bears. And he's like, him and Doug Kramer are kind of like the X factors, is you don't know what you're going to get, but you've got 2 guys that you felt confident enough to take a chance on. And, Alex Leatherwood had the handicap because he got mono and missed so much time, and Doug Kramer tore his Achilles,
yeah, he didn't play at all last year.
Yeah, he was redshirted. You didn't see, that happened in training camp.
Right.
You never even saw him play in a preseason game.
No.
So, and you would probably know him better than I because he played at U of I, but
yes, he did.
Big Ten produces good centers, and he is the size and tenacity and playing style. He is a lot like a guy that we would love to have on our team named Jason Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
So will these 2 guys perform? I can't say for certain.
Who knows? But
I like that the cupboard is not as bare as we think it is. It's not question mark, or we could field the starting 5 offensive linemen right now with actual options. It's
how good they would be, we don't know,
right.
But yes.
Like, I'd still say that right tackle, is our biggest point of need.
Mm-hmm.
So and best case scenario for the Bears is, you move on from Lucas Patrick and Cody Whitehair because you found guys. Like if Doug Kramer fits it, he's like, man, this guy is a beast. He's going to be our center. We move Tevin Jenkins into the left guard spot, and we drafted ourselves a right tackle, and we gained ourselves another like $14 million in cap space by getting rid of Patrick and Whitehair. You're like, thumbs up. But right now you sort of need those guys in the mix to, because you don't know exactly what you have. Patrick's coming off injuries. Whitehair is getting older. Kramer's coming off injury. Leatherwood's coming off injury. Jenkins is coming off an injury. And too many Bears fans are just really down on Braxton Jones, which is weird. It's weird to me that fans are down on him, but it's even more weird than when Mully and Haw are down on him, and everybody's so high on Orlando Brown. Braxton Jones was had better Pro Football Focus scores than Orlando Brown during the regular season.
Yeah, I noticed you pointed that out, which I honestly didn't know.
Is, Orlando Brown has the bigger name, and Orlando Brown actually, if you take out the Super Bowl, he actually had a really bad postseason, but he played really well in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that really stood out because we talked about on the show when we recapped the Super Bowl, just how well that line played against a really good Eagles team.
Right. He made himself.
So that really helps magnify it. You magnify yourself on the biggest stage in sports.
So Braxton Jones, I think, is especially coming as a late round pick out of a tiny school where he never really played against the same competition that he's playing against now. He was technically sound. The one thing, the knock on him was he just needs to get stronger. And coming out of Southern Utah, like, of course you've got to get stronger. And they talk like he knows that. Every offensive line coach, offensive coach on the Bears knows this. He knows this, and that's what he's working on. He's working on getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even more funny is there's going to be a couple digs I take at Mully and Haw on the show, this episode, but they bitched and moaned that the Bears don't have these high priced guys or these high draft pick guys on offensive line. And then they praised Jimmy Johnson because he was a genius and smarter than everyone else. And Jimmy Johnson was on the show talking about his whole offensive line was like undrafted rookies and fifth round picks. And
Yep.
So if he's a genius for doing that, then why are you tearing down Ryan Poles for not having these high draft picks? Like, find the guys that fit what you're trying to do. And honestly, offensive line is about working together. You got to keep them healthy. 5 guys that are going to stay healthy. They're going to work together and become a unit, play much better.
Yeah, and I mean, you had Mully and Haw like panicking after day 1 or day 2. Oh, why haven't you addressed this? What, like they're acting like there's no draft coming up in a few months when you have 10 picks? That like everything has to be solved in free agency.
Right. Yep. Or the first day of free agency, like is, I wanted to put together, say that projected starting roster as of, mid-March, because you're like, okay, the Bears could go out there and field a team right now. And they're still going to add a few more free agents because at this point last year, let's see, what is today? The 19th?
Mm-hmm.
Last year on March 19th, they signed 3 free agents. They signed 4 more in the month of March. They signed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eight more before the draft. They're not done. They're not done adding guys.
No, they're not.
They've got $41.5 million with room to add more dollars. I don't even think they're at the cap floor yet. They're going to add players. But we could field a starting team right now.
And you mentioned too that guys are going to get cut.
Yeah, there's guys that are going to be cut from other teams. There is that next round of the budget free agents, and budget free agents don't mean bad ones. There's, how many guys, like one of the most coveted interior offensive linemen with Ethan Posich this year. And he got I think a 3-year decent contract with the Browns. Last year, he was a guy that was signed as that third wave of free agency on like a veteran minimum deal with the Browns because their center retired. And so they just signed him on this veteran deal, and he played fantastic and earned himself a big contract this year. These guys, there's guys that can play. So just they need to calm down. Is the offensive line where we need it to be? Is the defensive line where we need to be?
Of course not.
No, but you know what? I think we're one offensive lineman away from actually feeling fairly comfortable. On
paper, obviously, injuries happen, but on paper, you feel pretty comfortable. And if that's the case, your offense should be pretty darn good. You've got your quarterback that should be taking a huge step in year 3, a line that's better, the ability to run the ball, and 5 receiving threats. So if your defense isn't up to where you want it to be, that's just a work in progress. You're not expecting to be a Super Bowl contender. Your goal is if you can solve that right tackle position, you should be a significantly better team than you were last year. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, here's the thing too, is we talked about many times on this show, and everybody's talked about it so many times. We all know how many holes this team has to fill. We got to know that you're not going to solve it in day 2 or 3 of free agency. And that doesn't mean that you're going to just disperse everything. Sometimes you address things kind of by area or position. So they went out and they got 2 linebackers the first day. So they addressed greatly that one area. Now you can move on to a few other things. They've addressed running back. They've addressed some of the defensive line. They have brought an offensive line in. Are they the primary solutions? No, but this is a process. This is the reality we're in. And the reality is you're going to fix a lot, hopefully, this offseason, but you're not going to fix everything. I think that a lot of people look at the Bears and see if everything goes well, you say, okay, a realistic timeline, if the Bears go very well in terms of actual Super Bowl contention, would hopefully be 2025. We want to look at 2024 as that big stepping stone. You could almost kind of look at it as like the Detroit Lions this past year, where you have a competitive record, you're in a playoff hunt, but you're not quite good enough to win a Super Bowl. That's the reality of it. You're not, you tore down this team to the studs. You demolished this team. You are starting from the ground up, but luckily you have a centerpiece in Justin Fields. So this is a process. You were never one offensive line away from being a Super Bowl contender. You're never one linebacker away from being a Super Bowl contender. You were never one edge rusher away from being a Super Bowl contender. This is a process, and you got to do it smartly. You can't be doing what Ryan Pace did or what people think that you can do in Madden. This isn't Madden.
But here's the thing is going from worst to first happens regularly in the NFL.
Every year.
Anything can happen, but putting yourself your options is take a modest step in the defense and a modest step on the offense and maintain that kind of equilibrium, or go all in, fix your offense, and then baby step your defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've gone somewhere, in between, closer to solving the offense and baby stepping on the defense, but pretty close to having your offense where you want it to be and taking a step forward on defense. So, there's room to fix this team, but there's also a path where you can see this team winning the division. The Lions are clearly an ascending team, but again, do you trust that quarterback to be your quarterback?
If everyone's healthy on that offense, I think they do. But if offensive linemen on the Lions start getting hurt, that could change the whole course of the year.
I think he's everything has to be right quarterback to win. You don't win because of him, and that's always going to be an Achilles heel. So, and the Packers, man, that whole, I want to get into that and before we finish talking football, but the Packers are in big flux and the Vikings are just selling off players. So there's a path to win this division.
There is. And like you said, worst to first, it happens. We've mentioned it on this show. And, obviously the nature of worst to first, there's a lot of things that go with it because the football season is 17 games. And a lot happens in 17 games one year versus the next year. When you play 17 games, one injury can really change the course of your team or another team. If one team underperforms or overperforms, that changes in your division. That can change your course right there. I mean, remember what happened 2017 versus 2018. 2017, the Bears were so awful. 2018, they win the division with 12 wins. I mean, that does happen. And the other thing, too, is your schedule is different every year. Yeah, you play your division, but your other opponents are different. And the Bears have a more favorable schedule. And I'm not saying the Bears are going to win the division. I'm saying that, like, to your point, we can't fully rule out what's going to happen.
And here's a few free agents that I just kind of, there's a lot more free agents, but these are some names that are out there. There's at the edge, Jadeveon Clowney. Is he the guy that was drafted number 1 overall that we thought was going to be a generational guy? No. But would he be the best pass rusher the Bears have? Probably.
Most likely, yes.
Cornerback, a guy with strong ties with the Flus, Rock Ya-Sin, who is a free agent. I think that would be a nice veteran presence on the other side because you're probably going to be in nickel most of the time. So Jalen Johnson and Rock Ya-Sin with Kyler Gordon. I think that gives you, and that makes Jalen Jones the guy that fills in if you in your dime package or if somebody's injured. I think that's a better spot. Then you can finally move on from Kindle Vildor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Bears fans wouldn't mind that. Even though Vildor last year, I'm not going to say he was good, but I thought he was better than he was the year before.
Oh, yeah, significantly better. But, I mean,
still,
he's a guy that's making much more money than some other players. You could probably almost have it a wash with Rock Ya-Sin's contract in Kindle Vildor.
Sure.
Isaiah Wynn is a free agent tackle, and he's had some injury concerns, but when he's healthy, he's a pretty darn good player. He can play both sides of the line, left tackle or right tackle. Kyle Van Noy, who another edge rusher. And I'm going to throw out a name that everyone's going to groan when I say, but he's not going to get the same kind of money as he was getting. Leonard Floyd.
Do you think he fits this defense though? Being a 3-4 guy.
I mean, there's talk of having Tremaine Edmonds pass rushing more. I'm just saying is we're low on guys that are going to be getting to the quarterback.
I know we are. We really, really are. I get it, but
I'm less optimistic than I was about Dominique Robinson and Travis Gibson.
Dominic Robinson, he made an early solid impression in that week 1 win against the 49ers. And then kind of since then, you kind of forgot he was there.
And then the last thing I want to talk about with the Bears is just some guys. We're sitting at 9 right now. These are some of the players that could benefit the Bears there's a good chance that they're available at this point at number 9. So you won't hear me say Will Anderson, because if he's available at 9, then something is kaflooey. Tyree Wilson, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. He's a guy that is a physical specimen and a little raw, but man, he has got the traits to just be a dominant edge rusher. Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon. He's likely going to be the first cornerback off the board. I think he could go to Detroit at 6. He's my likely pick there, but I'm not close enough to the Lions to be able to accurately predict, but he could fall to 9 at the Bears. Peter Skoronski, who I list just as offensive line, because, I want to say, hey, he's got short arms. He's probably not going to make it, but man,
he can play.
He can play. And the head coach at Northwestern was pretty pissed that people want to say that. And, the guy that the Vikings drafted last year, there was a little bit of concern about his arms. I mean, he's not nearly as short of arms as Peter Skoronski, but that guy could play. And, if worst case scenario, Skoronski comes in and is a dominant left guard and gives you 10 years as a all-pro guard. I mean, I think that's a good scenario. Paris Johnson, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. I think there's been rumblings that he could be also the number 1 corner off the board, but probably number 2. And just for shits and giggles, I put Quentin Johnson, the wide receiver out of TCU. I think he will be available for the Bears as well. So if they stay at 9, you're probably looking at one of those guys right there. And a name that I see either with one of those seconds or maybe even that early 3rd round pick that I'm starting to watch more film of and I'm really, really liking a lot is Darnell Wright. He's a right tackle out of Tennessee. And while I was like Googling more about him, I saw a quote from Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama. They asked him who he thought was the toughest guy he had to go against in college was, and he said Darnell Wright. And I was like, okay, the most dominant college pass rusher in a decade said that this guy is the best guard or best tackle he's gone against. And I'm like, all right, that's a good sign.
Says something.
And you watch the film on him, you're like, pretty darn good. So he could be a target in the second round. But I do briefly want to talk about this whole Green Bay situation.
Yeah, it is important. It is relevant.
It's funny is if you go on Twitter, no matter what you say, somebody's going to jump down your throat. But the reality is who's got the leverage. And it just depends on the timing. Because right now, Green Bay is going to say, we're going to sit and wait this out. Because who's going to play quarterback for the Jets? And that's fair. But at a certain point, if the Packers don't trade Aaron Rodgers, that contract just is devastating to their salary cap.
Yep.
Because it guarantees these bonuses that he has, and it's at a certain point. And you could say, oh, well, actually at points fairly far down the field, down the way, it's, well into training camp when that is. But the thing is, Aaron Rodgers can artificially change that by saying, you know what? I don't like that. I don't know what's happening next year. I'm going to retire. And then the Packers can go, oh, rejoice. We don't have to deal with him, but they're not going to get any compensation for him. And then he could just say, I changed my mind. I'm coming back during training camp. And then I'm going to retire if you try to trade me to somebody else. And you are stuck $40 million over the salary cap. Like, he has you by the cojones. And he's saying, I'm only going to get traded to the Jets and make this happen. The Jets really just got to wait this out, knowing that Aaron Rodgers is going to play for them. And, and the Packers are just like, man, they're trying to save face because they stupidly said that they want a Matt Stafford trade. On what planet would the Jets want to give up a package like that for a 39-year-old quarterback that may only play this one more season?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you're going to be taking a big risk with a guy as talented as Rodgers is. Like you said, he's older, and the guy goes into darkness retreats and talks about how he was most likely going to retire before the darkness retreat. Then he comes out and Green Bay apparently says, oh, we're ready to move on. And he's like, well, I wasn't necessarily ready to move on. So now he wanted to commit to playing with the New York Jets. So my point being is, to your point, kind of what you said is you might only get him for 1 year and then that's it, depending on how things go.
So, you can't cut the guy.
No. It's you trade him or he's there or he decides to retire.
So it's if you cut him, he retires, it's like cutting him.
Right.
So if he retires, your options are, and he doesn't have to do you any solids, is he retires pre-June 1. If he retires pre-June 1, your cap hit is right now you're at $44 million over the cap. And if you kick that down the road for next year, post June 1, where you can split it over 2, you're $20 million over the cap this year. So you have to trade him. Like, you have to trade him. That's the way that it's going to work. You have to trade him. Because I mean, if you keep him on your team, that's doable too. You can fit that in your cap. It sucks next year. But you keep him on your team, and that's much better than him retiring. So you sort of need to keep him around or trade him. And they don't want to do either one because they're not going to get the value they think they are. And the consensus is the only two teams that really matter are the Jets and the Packers. But the consensus is among anybody that's not involved in it is the max they would give up is a second round pick for him. And most teams are saying a conditional second round pick.
Yeah, so how that goes down, when that goes down is obviously going to be something to be looked at. But yeah, I feel like here the Jets are going to get what they want. I mean, I don't see a scenario where this is going to fall apart. Rodgers has made it very clear he's determined to play for the Jets next year. This isn't him saying, well, if they trade me, they trade me. If not, he seems pretty set on this. And I don't think if it were to fall through, do I think Rodgers plays with the Packers? I'm not so sure. He's made it very clear that, he says that there's no hard feelings or whatever, but I don't see it where he would play for the Packers if this fell through. I think he would rather retire at this point.
How funny would it be just to cause chaos if the Packers were just like, you know what, if they publicly said that they're just going to hold out and wait, and because they know that the Jets don't have a quarterback option, and then Tom Brady just put out a tweet saying, considering coming out of retirement to play for the Jets.
Oh, God.
And just watching old Gutenkunst have a grabber.
And you know what? I could totally see that happening.
Oh, yeah, that would be hilarious.
Like if Tom Brady any second now said he wanted to play again, he's looking to play again, would you be surprised? I don't think anybody would. I'm not expecting it to. But
I still think there's a solid chance that he comes back. But it's going to be to the Jets or the Dolphins. It'll be a team that has a good team where he has a good shot to win.
Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are the quarterbacks on the Jets. They just take turns each set of downs.
So I honestly, I'm on the side of the Packers have to make this trade, and they're just going to have to suck it up. And if I'm the Jets, I don't get, if the thing is if the Jets wait long enough, not only do the Green Bay Packers become desperate, but it's a better financial situation for you because then those bonuses get guaranteed and they're paid. Part of it is paid by the Packers. And then you can say, hey, we can't give you a draft pick in this draft pick. It's going to have to be for upcoming years. And then you can put the condition on it. Okay, we'll give you a third round pick. It can go to a second round pick if Aaron Rodgers wins us a Super Bowl or Aaron Rodgers plays 3 years for us.
And think about if the Jets go out and bring in more of Aaron's friends. They already brought Alan Lazard. What if they went out and got some more of his buddies and kind of fulfilled Aaron's wish list so that it would make it very, very clear that if he's playing next year, it's truly only going to be for the Jets. So it's like, well, you better get a deal for me or I'm retiring. And guess what? You're going to have to pay me all that shit, or they're going to have to, it's going to go against the cap, however that works. Still not the best with cap. So, because if I know correctly, if Rodgers retires, that goes against their cap, correct?
Oh, yeah, it's bad against their cap.
Yeah, it's very bad. That's all I know. So I don't know what the number is. I don't know exactly how it works. I need to get more familiar with that stuff, admittedly. But yes, I mean, the Packers, the last thing they would want is for this deal to fall through and he ends up retiring. Because if the deal falls through, I do not see Aaron Rodgers playing it down for the Packers, period.
Yeah, and the Jets are going out and signing Donald Driver and Greg Jennings.
Jordy Nelson.
Jordy Nelson.
I don't even know why I'm here. They just wanted me here. Why am I doing this?
Oh man. They're signing AJ Hawk.
They're so gonna sign Randall Cobb, aren't they?
Oh yeah. I mean,
they are so signing Randall Cobb.
Where else is he gonna go? I mean, that's gonna be a minimal deal. Like it's almost silly not to if you're the Jets.
It's gonna be boxes of Sbarro pizza.
Because honestly, though, if the Jets aren't able to make this trade, if the Packers cut off their nose to spite their face, what do you do with the Jets? I mean, what are your options? Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, luring Tom Brady out of retirement, Teddy Bridgewater, Joe Flacco.
Trade for Money Mitch from Pittsburgh.
You could trade for Mitch Trubisky. I mean, but those are your kind of your options.
Yeah, I mean, listen, getting Aaron Rodgers would be a huge get for the Jets, because you know what? I know he wasn't the same Aaron Rodgers last year, but I can guarantee you this is that if Aaron Rodgers goes where he wants to be, because even though he got his payday last year, they restructured the deal and whatnot with Green Bay, you still can't tell me there wasn't some tension there. I don't know to what extent, but I feel like that there was something there that just wasn't purely him playing on the field, and that's why you saw some struggles at times in Green Bay. It also didn't help they didn't have Devontae Adams anymore, because that makes a big difference. But I feel like if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, he's got that great defense around him, he's where he wants to be, then I think he can have a really good year despite his age.
We shall see. We shall see. But either way, the Bears no longer have to face Aaron Rodgers twice a year.
Right. And I'm a little scared, though. And it's superstition. It's worry. You know what I'm worried about. I've said this before.
Jordan Love is going to be a Hall of Famer quarterback.
Yes. Because there are things about his game that I like. I look at some of the stuff he could do. I'm like, shit.
The thing is, though, if he was so good, why did they give Aaron Rodgers that 3-year extension that kind of crippled them?
Which is fair, but at the same time, we're talking about one of the top, arguably 3 greatest quarterbacks ever. If we were talking about, do we give a big payday to Matt Ryan or Jordan Love, I think they'd be more willing to go with Jordan Love versus a guy who's literally been the best of the best at that position.
Right, but he's also been a top 3 douche too.
Well, yes, but if he's winning you MVPs, you tolerate it. I think that after this season, when you didn't make the playoffs and he didn't have an MVP season, I think that was the drawing point for them. We're like, all right, we're not dealing with this guy anymore. Like, the last 2 years, yeah, he was a massive tool, but you know what? He was a really good massive tool. He was winning you MVPs and he was winning you division titles. And even though things kind of fell apart in the playoffs, he was giving you a legit chance to win a Super Bowl. That changed last year when I still think there was clearly some tensions. They weren't playing as good as we thought, and you didn't make the playoffs. And once again, you had a bad moment when it mattered most. In 2021, it was not dumping it off to Alan Lazard and throwing for a double-covered Devontae Adams, leading to a loss. Last year, it was a back-breaking interception on his final drive against the Lions, which cost them a shot at the playoffs. Now that happened, I think after that, it's like, you know what? The Packers, they were done with him. Like, we're not dealing with this anymore. We're willing to move on from him, despite everything he's done for us. If you're not even going to bring us to the playoffs, then we're going to be done with this.
Fair.
And you know what? Here's what I think could happen. Jordan Love could be good, but not that good. Like, if he was I'm not saying his game is the same, but like, if you comped the value to like an in-prime Derek Carr, where you're like, okay, he's good, but he's not that good, then I think that as the Bears, you can compete with that. And I think that that is a realistic outcome, because I don't think Jordan Love is just straight trash. I think that with the coaching he can have there, with some of his attributes, he can at least be a solid guy. I'm just hoping he doesn't just find this Hall of Fame rhythm, like that he's suddenly this great top tier quarterback. That's what I'm worried about. And that's just pure superstition on my end. But I think if you looked realistically at Jordan Love, you could see him being a good, solid quarterback, but is he going to be in prime Aaron Rodgers? Realistically, I have my doubts, but the meatball fan in me worries that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I hear that. I feel the same way.
But we'll see. I mean, right now, I still think the biggest threat to the Bears is Detroit.
Oh, agreed. Absolutely. I mean, it's, the Vikings are on a downward path.
They don't scare me. Even when they're good, that's never outside of 2017, because 2017 they had a great defense. But even like when they first got Kirk Cousins in 2018 and they made the playoffs in 2019 and they won the division with 13 games last year, I never saw that team as, even though they beat us twice, you look at the first game, we almost won that game if it wasn't for the ball getting taken away. And you look at the quality of wins, you look at them and say, you're not a bad opponent, but we're not afraid of you.
And who's the other quarter or the other wide receiver
outside of Jefferson?
Yeah.
Mm.
And Kirk Cousins, he's never going to win you a big game. Never.
And that's kind of how it's the epitome of the Vikings, because they're not bad. They're not. You don't look at I don't look at them next year and say the Vikings are going to be a bad team. I think they're going to be a competitive team. I think they're going to be a solid team. My whole point is, I don't think they're going to be a great team. I don't think they're a team that you go out there and say, boy, I don't think we have a chance against these guys. They'll be a competitive team, just they're not a top tier team, I don't think. Kirk Cousins, the overall numbers are always really good. He's a solid, good quarterback, but when the lights shine the brightest, we just haven't seen those wins from him.
Right. All right, where should we move to from here?
Well, I just have one Bulls note that I think we have to bring up really quick.
Lonzo Ball is never going to play basketball again?
Yeah, I mean, this is a third knee surgery.
It's bad. It's bad news.
It is. And honestly, I think the trajectory of the Bulls, I think they'll be in the play-in tournament. And then it just, you either win the play-in tournament or you lose. The farthest you go is a first-round exit. It was fun watching that double overtime game against the Timberwolves, but the Timberwolves also kind of helped you out. If the Timberwolves didn't play some bad, dumb basketball, you probably would have lost that game. You own the Heat. You could beat them, but, you just, again, it's the same stories with the Bulls, and at least Levine is playing better and Vooch has played a little better, and Kobe White's playing some solid ball, but Alex Caruso, he's hurt again. And Lonzo Ball might never play again.
Yeah, you should have traded. I mean, you should have traded Caruso.
Yeah. I don't have much else to say there. It's really unfortunate for Lonzo Ball because he was such a good piece on this team when he got here, because
Mhm.
you were seeing the elite defense. You were seeing all-star caliber play, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You were seeing elite defense, and you were seeing an
He was.
improved three-point shooter.
You saw the best of three and D wing.
Yes. He was on pace to be an NBA All-Star. I am very convinced of that. It really sucks because I was so excited about that move, and it worked when he was healthy. But now he might not even play again. One thing seems for sure, even if he does somehow play again, it's not going to be at that caliber.
Yeah, he's going to be a shell of himself. And that's honestly, it's sad. It sucks that it happened to a player on the Bulls. It sucks that happens to anybody, period. And can he play again? I don't know, maybe. But, what's the best you can expect from him? A Derrick Rose type career where, like you find your footing as a decent piece on a non-championship roster. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm hopeful. I like him. It's just a sucky situation.
Yeah, it is. And, again, we won't know for sure until it happens. But one thing I can say is my current prediction for Lonzo Ball is I could see him playing again, but like overseas somewhere.
Maybe.
It's going to be really hard to recover and get back to the NBA. I am hoping to God he can, because of a fan I am of him. I just don't know if it's going to happen. That's all I really got to say about that.
All right. Where do you want to move on to next?
Well, the Blackhawks.
They're too good to tank.
I feel bad because when they beat Boston, I was angry.
That hurt.
I was angry. And the fact that my team beat a historically good team, making me angry, made me even more angry. I'm like, I'm angry that I'm angry at this.
I think it was Mark Lazarus that tweeted out that before the game, either the Blackhawks win this game or they lose by 5 goals.
Right.
And they won.
Right. And they won convincingly.
Yeah.
It was a fun game. And I'm mad about it.
That fourth line is really fun. The Kachuk, Kara, Anderson line is fun. Like, is anybody good on that line? I don't think so. But man, they make things happen. They play tough. They cause all kinds of mayhem. And they're part of the reason that this team is winning hockey games.
I mean, you look at some of the play from these guys and you say two things. One, you're liking some of these depth pieces you could get a further look at in the future. And two, you continue to really like Luke Richardson's style. I really, really like Luke Richardson as a head coach.
Right.
This team plays hard. They got a good culture. They are doing a lot of good things with Luke Richardson. But
that's why I'm really hoping they can get a top pick in this draft, because it can jumpstart your rebuild and actually give Luke Richardson talent to work with and see what he can do.
Yeah. And I would love that talent to have a good shot at one of those generational talents in the top few picks.
So I was looking at the schedule, and if you're looking at the Tankathon, which I've been living and dying on lately, the Blackhawks, the odds are they're going to be one of the 4 worst teams record-wise. There's that 15 Montreal is several wins up on Anaheim, who's currently 4th. But those 4 teams, the Blackhawks are probably going to be one of the 4 worst. And the 3 worst teams right now are Columbus, San Jose, and the Blackhawks. And I started looking at schedules, and man, it's not shaping up that good for the Blackhawks.
No, it's not.
They all 3 teams play about the same number of games against current playoff teams. So Columbus, 7 of their 13 remaining games are against playoff teams. Blackhawks, 7 of their 13 are against playoffs, and San Jose, 8 of their last 12, because they only have 12 games left, are against playoff teams. And then you look at games that are against bad teams that are very winnable. Columbus has 2, Blackhawks have 4, San Jose has 2. And the Blackhawks already up by like 5 points on Columbus, and I think 2 on San Jose. And the reason this is important is, the worse you are record-wise, the better chance you have of winning the draft lottery. And also, the way the lottery works for the NHL is that the first 2 spots in the draft are going to be a lottery. So if you're the Blackhawks and you don't win the lottery, you're going to drop down 2 spots lower than where you would have otherwise. So if, let's say, the Canadians and the Canucks end up finishing 1-2 in the lottery, and you had the 3rd best record or 3rd worst record, you're going to get the 5th pick in the draft. So whenever you kind of do Tankathon and you go, man, why do I keep seeing the Blackhawks going lower, worse pick than where they're currently slotted? That's the reason, is teams with much lower percentages to win the lottery are winning and jumping you and pushing you down. So that's what, if you have the worst record, so if this season ended right now, the worst Columbus could draft would be 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's important to get that 2nd worst record at least.
And I don't see that happening at this point.
I don't either.
We've won too many games.
Right. And that's why it would have been important to be one of the 2 worst teams, because you would, in a 4-player draft, you would be guaranteed one of those 4 players. And right now, you're 3rd. So you have a good shot of being 5th in a 4-player draft. And the thing is you very well could fall to, probably not going to happen, but you could go all the way to the 5th worst draft pick and then get the 7th pick. So if you're the Blackhawks, you've got to start losing some games here.
I think they're going to win several more.
Yeah, they've got the Canucks twice, who are not good. They've got the Blues, who are not good. They've got the Flyers, who are not good. Those are winnable games. But I went through and I ran 100 simulations. And The Blackhawks got the number 1 pick 14% of the time.
Kind of better than I thought.
The number 2 pick 12% of the time. The number 3 pick 6% of the time. The 4th pick 46% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the 5th pick 22% of the time.
Yeah. That's kind of where I feel we're going to be.
And the crazy part is because you can only move up max of 10 spots. So the odds, if you're the number 1 or if you have the worst record of getting the number 1 overall pick, you get bonus picks because the teams that are 11th and 12th in the or higher in the lottery, they can't win the number 1 pick. The best they could do is move up 10 spots. So you kind of get their shots at number 1, and it adds up. So you've got, if you're the worst record, you've got like a 25% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. And you're guaranteed a top 3 pick. My hopes are for Bedard are dwindling. Right. And we'll find out May 8th.
Yes, we will.
We're like 6 weeks away, and we'll know. And it's funny, if you go on like The Athletic and you look at any article about it, man, there are so many tinfoil hat wearing fans. And they're like, the lottery should be live because otherwise we know the fix is in and they're going to give it to the Blackhawks.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm just like, they're like, they already got Patrick Kane when they didn't deserve him.
They were one of the worst teams in the league those years.
So, yeah, I'm getting nervous because they're playing too well, but
sucks to say, but yeah, because you love the fact that you got a good coach and you're seeing some good things, but we know what this year's about.
You got rid of your last coach a year too soon, because I guarantee you they would have kept Ding Dong. They would be the worst team in the league.
Oh, under Colleton, yeah, this would be a historically bad team.
This team would be running away with it because he was a terrible coch.
Yeah, no question they would be a much, much worse team than they are now under that.
I mean, the good thing is they had a nice loss against Arizona.
They did. That was big.
I was worried because I think they were up 1-0, and I was like, man, if they beat this garbage Arizona team, who's only hitting the cap floor because they're taking on contracts of
dead contracts.
Yeah, they're taking on contracts of dead players. I'm like, that would be so annoying.
I was worried too. When they were up 1-0, I'm like, yep, of course. I think they're up 2-1 at one point too. They were.
And it was funny. When I was going through today, I was like, man, I'm not reconciling us. I'm like, Columbus should have another game here. And I'm like, oh, wait, they're actually playing right now. That's why it's.
And I believe they're losing.
Oh, man, they got their asses kicked 7-2. Asses kicked. All right, let's talk baseball real quick. Not much I have to say other than my last point about kicking Mully and Haw in the shins is Mully was early on in spring training was like, oh man, the Dodgers, they brought Jason Hayward in. They fixed his swing. It looked so bad on the Cubs. I can't believe it. They're just showing why they're a much better team than the Cubs. And the ding dong based it on like one good game by Jason Hayward. And the guy's back down to batting below the Mendoza line.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't fix his swing. He might make the roster because of injuries, but he is he is not going to be a dominant player. He's not going to, find the fountain of youth or find that swing again.
The overreaction from hitting one spring training home run was a tad ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, because if we're going to go off of spring training results, man, Trey Mancini is going to be the MVP.
Right.
So
there is a bit of a balance taking stock in spring training results, because you look at certain things and there are things you can kind of dismiss, and there are things you're like, okay, well, maybe what about this? What about that? Good and bad. Like, I think Trey Mancini is going to be a good player. Dansby Swanson is having a beyond horrific spring training, but I don't think it's going to be as horrific in the regular season. I'm not at that point yet. Obviously, we haven't even played a regular season game. Justin Steele has had a rough spring training, but he's trying to work on a few things. So, okay, whatever. Though with all this said,
spring training
offense,
don't matter, bro.
I know
in the grand
but,
scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
I know, but I think more. I watch more and more every day as some of these regulars that are going to be in the lineup. I really don't think Cody Bellinger is finding the fountain of youth.
No, but honestly, he's a placeholder.
He is. That's what he is. He'll play good defense.
That's what you want. You want a good defense and power. He's going to give you those. He's probably going to give you 20 plus home runs or some. Okay. He's
wind blowing in right field. I don't know.
All right. He has got the capability of hitting 20 home runs.
He does.
He might hit 200 while he does it, but he's still going to give you good defense. And
yes.
Did you overpay for that? Yeah.
It's 1 year.
He's a 1 year placeholder because we've got multiple outfielders coming up. I mean, not likely, but there's a possibility PCA could play next year.
Yeah, it's sure.
Brennan Davis could be up this year. If he comes back and there's if he's physically 100% not showing any, and
it's got to hit, man.
And if he's hitting, if he hit like he did before the injury, okay, hey, he could be up, because this time last year, we were like, oh, when is he going to be up next year or this coming year? When? Not if, when. Correct?
Early on before the injury, I think we were discussing that possibility, yes.
So, you've got guys. So he's just a placeholder. So if he doesn't work out, who cares? He's just
but the lineup as a whole. The lineup as a whole. If he's not hitting that great, Tucker Barnhart's not going to give you anything offensively. Yan Gomes might pop a home run every now and then. He's got some decent power, but he's not going to be hitting you a whole lot. Seiya Suzuki, little worried about that.
Have we got an update yet?
He's doing more baseball activities. He was taking dry swings. It's a slow process, but man, those injuries linger. That scares the shit out of me.
I just don't want to, people give this opening day as this magical day. And I don't want that arbitrary day to define when he needs to be back. I would rather him miss opening day and be healthier for the whole season.
And I think that's the plan.
Than come back too soon so he can play opening day.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
But this team needs a lot of things to go right. But then just remember that the Mets went on a really good run and in 2015 based on the back of one guy who was just absolutely crushing a baseball. Baseball, if you have one guy just absolutely tearing it up, can lead your team to a lot of victories. So if you give yourself enough guys on your roster that are capable of doing that, I know Trey Mancini had a down year last year, but
I feel good about him.
He's a guy that had played really well for the Orioles. And
he played well last year for the Orioles too. It was those Astros numbers that kind of sank him.
And we know we're going to get good play from Horner and Swanson. Ian Happ's probably going to put together a nice year.
I feel good about him.
Whatever you get from Bellinger, you get from Bellinger. And it's so if the odds of these guys all having career worst years or slumping at the same time, they're not great odds of that. So it's just, can we have enough guys put together good streaks at the same time to give us wins and know a lot of more peaks than troughs. That's where we're at. It's a game of averages. So the pitching is going to keep us in games. Very confident in the pitching. So if Bellinger stinks, then Bellinger stinks. Makes it a lot easier to get rid of him.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I like their defense a lot. I think they're going to be a very strong defensive team. I like the pitching upside that they have within this organization. I feel good about that. I just, as time goes on more and more, I just am not so sure about this lineup being anything that good.
But, I mean, it's clearly better than last year.
It should be.
But the two things I wanted to talk about are Hayden Wesneski has the number 5 rotation piece locked up, right?
He better. That slider is like a frisbee.
And all right, Ian Happ. I'm gonna throw in a contract number out there. You tell me, is this good for Happ? Is it good for the Cubs? Is it good for both? And does this happen? 6 years, $100 million.
6 years, $100 million. I don't know if the Cubs do that. I personally, so that's what, you're paying 6 years. So he's in his late 20s now. So that's taking you to his mid 30s, give or take. And you said $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at an AAV of 16.6, basically, if you spread that out evenly.
Mm-hmm.
I think AAV wise, that's good for the Cubs. I think they get stickler over years. I would do it. I think that's a good deal overall. Ian Happ, you get some job security. I feel like they're scared to go over 4 or 5 years. You had to do it with Swanson, but I would say do that. I would do it. Will they? I don't know. They don't extend these guys, and it's frustrating.
I think Happ deserves to be extended.
I do too.
Because it's insurance if the young guys don't pan out to what you expect them to be. And if they do, he could be traded because you'd have him locked up and he's a good player.
Or you just rotate them around. You have a DH now.
Yeah.
Fair
enough.
It's You have a lot of outfield prospects, but how many of them are actually going to hit? I don't know. I'm not as high on Brennan Davis as others. I like PCA. Love Kevin Alcantara, but he's a ways off. You have something in front of you that you know you have.
And then let's wrap this up with the White Sox. Two things I want to say. One is, I'm losing my voice here. One is, who's the closer on this team? We're like 2 weeks away from the end of spring training. Who's going to be the closer?
I mean, I would say either Kendall Graveman or Reynaldo Lopez.
I like Reynaldo Lopez as the closer. I mean, is Joe Kelly out of experience going to get an opportunity?
Don't go with Joe Kelly. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen.
And Moncada, is the World Baseball Classic turning him around?
Well, ideally for them, yes. He's been hitting the daylights out of the ball. He's been spraying it all around the field.
I mean, if the White Sox get that guy, then
yeah, you're making the playoffs.
You have to feel real good about, maybe this is the spark that he needed to revive his career. This is the guy you thought you were getting when you got him. So, hopefully that sticks, because this is the guy that White Sox fans wanted to see. He's looked fantastic.
Yeah. And
I mean, what's his OPS, like 1,200, 1,300?
I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's very good.
Yeah. I mean, he's just killing it.
Yeah, he looks fantastic. And if he's that, then I think the Sox are in the playoffs. I mean, I still think the Sox are making the playoffs. I think that offense is going to really bounce back this year if they're all healthy, because Eloy looked good. Moncada's looked good. Tim Anderson has helped out Team USA. So the top of that lineup, I think, is elite. You just got to stay healthy.
And, I know Moncada's not going to hit like this in the regular season, because that would just be historical greatness. But, if he gives you these glimpses of guy with a live bat, he's been mashed potatoes for the last couple seasons.
Right.
That's great for you.
And again, it's one of those things you ask, how much stock do you take in it? I think that it's a good sign. How much do you take in it? I honestly don't know, but it's much better seeing him hit, right, than not seeing him hit. I think that's a much better sign. So maybe this is the spark he needed. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, it's not crazy, but it's cool to see the World Baseball Classic just bring out so much passion and fire in these players.
It's been fun to watch. It really has. And
I saw, what was it? Was one of the games with Japan where it was like the television ratings were higher than the World Series. Like,
yeah,
people love
like
this.
Despite
I
what
love
Keith
it.
Olbermann says.
Yeah, I don't care about him.
Yeah.
Like, could you move this to a different time? Maybe, but I love it. I'm loving this.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I have it on the TV right now. Watching Trey Turner, holy crap. What a series he's had.
Yeah.
He had the game-winning grand slam last night, and tonight he's hit 2 more home runs. Like, he's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's too much fun. Baseball needs this.
Yes, it does.
You want to make this a bigger sport, is you have it grow in other countries. Like, the NFL owns America, but it's struggling to be important outside of North America. Like, Canada likes it fine. Mexico's starting to like it, but really it's a North American sport, and mostly United States. but it owns the United States.
Yes.
Baseball is quickly losing its grip on as America's pastime. I mean, it's long lost, I guess. But it's losing its grip on that second and third place as well. And you need to grow it with the younger population. You need to grow it outside the United States, and this does both.
Yeah, I mean, look how big it is in other countries, like look how big it is in Japan, look how big it is in Central America, like the Dominican Republic and Venezuela and Mexico. And you look also too, it's, you're seeing some really good talent come from Canada. I think that there's more baseball love in Canada than people realize.
Yeah, agreed. Well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Nope, I think I've said my piece.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with your friends. It's how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, or ShyFanPat2 on Twitter, or oh my God, I'm drawing AlexanderJPatCreative.com for all the cool stuff that Alex does. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan.
She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears!
Oh, when the Bears go